So hi students, welcome to another session on human physiology, and in this session we are going to discuss the chapter that is excretory products and their elimination. So I'm your teacher and guide Vijesh VK from Excel Academy. So let's begin with the session. So in this chapter, that is excretory products and their elimination, we are going to discuss the following topics. So let's have a look at the topics. So we'll begin with the introduction. We will be discussing about the human excretory system. We'll learn the mechanism of urine formation. What are the steps involved? We will learn the function of tubules, that is a nephron. We'll see the mechanism of concentration of urine, and also we will be discussing the disorders of excretory system. So let's begin with the introduction. So whenever we study any of the human system in our body, right? So if you talk about the circulatory system works on the blood. That is, you have the heart which pumps the blood, right? And your blood acts as the transport system of your body to transport different substances. So if we take the example of respiratory system, we observe that the respiratory system works on gases, right? So similarly, what is the substance on which your excretory system is working? It is your metabolic waste. So we'll be beginning our discussion on this chapter by trying to understand how the metabolic waste accumulates. Okay, how the metabolic waste accumulates. So we know that animals accumulate ammonia, urea, uric acid, carbon dioxide, water and ions like sodium and potassium, etc. Right? Now, how are these metabolic waste produced? They are produced due to the different chemical reactions that are occurring in our body. In this chapter, our focus on the excretory products, because if you recollect, the title of the chapter is Excretory Products and Their Elimination. We will be focusing on the following excretory product, that is ammonia, urea as well as uric acid. If we observe these nitrogenous waste, we observe that either there is a need to remove them totally or they need to be removed partially. Okay, they need to be removed partially. So let's have a look at the different types of nitrogenous waste products. So as I have mentioned earlier, we have to study the following nitrogenous waste products, that is ammonia, urea, uric acid. As you can have a look, all these products, that is ammonia, urea and uric acid, they contain nitrogen, right? So they are nitrogenous waste products excreted by the animals. So let's begin with this question. Which is the most toxic form of nitrogenous waste? So we have ammonia, we have urea as well as uric acid. So out of these three, which one is the most toxic form? Any guesses? So the answer is ammonia. Ammonia is the most toxic form of all the nitrogenous waste product. And what's the reason? Because it requires large amount of water for its elimination. And that can be the deciding factor, okay, which kind of organism adopts which kind of nitrogenous waste. If suppose you have a terrestrial animal, and if it produces ammonia as a nitrogenous waste product, then this same ammonia will be quite lethal, because the terrestrial animal will have to utilize most of its water for the removal of ammonia. Okay, so which is the most toxic form of nitrogenous waste? It is ammonia. So we are left with the question, which is the least toxic form out of the three that we have just discussed so far? That is ammonia, urea as well as uric acid. So we have already got the answer that ammonia is the most toxic form. So the least toxic form is uric acid. Uric acid, being the least toxic, can be removed with a minimum loss of water. So how did we actually standardized which nitrogenous waste is the most toxic and which one is the least toxic? It is by the amount of water that is required for the removal of these nitrogenous waste product. So whichever nitrogenous waste product needs high amount of water for its removal, such a nitrogenous waste product will be considered to be the most toxic. And the one which needs minimum loss of water will be considered as least toxic. So now let's have a look at the classification of animals based on nitrogenous waste produced. So we can observe that there are three types. The first one is ammonotelics, the second one is ureotelics, and the third one is uricotelics. So let's have a look one by one. So if we have a look at ammonotelism, ammonotelism is actually the process by which ammonotelic animal excrete ammonia. So those animals which produce ammonia as a waste product, okay, those animals we call them as ammonotelic, and the process is known as ammonotelism. So students, with regard to your exams, you're supposed to remember the given examples. So the examples given are, you have many bony fishes, aquatic amphibians, and aquatic insects. So here, make a note that they have mentioned about aquatic organism, and the aquatic organism that are involved are actually freshwater. Okay, are actually freshwater and not marine water. Marine water, as you know, marine organisms, because the water is so saline, they cannot make use of the same water. So we can't include marine organism under ammonotelism. Okay, so many bony fishes, aquatic amphibians, and aquatic insects are ammonotelic in nature. So how do these organisms remove ammonia? As we know that ammonia is readily soluble, it can be generally excreted by diffusion. So if we have aquatic amphibians and aquatic insects, then the removal of ammonia will be through the body surface. And if it is aquatic fishes, then the removal of ammonia will be through gill surface. So as I had raised a question in the beginning of this chapter, what if the terrestrial animals adopt ammonia as their excretory waste product? What will happen? What about terrestrial animals? Right? So terrestrial adaptation necessitated the production of lesser toxic nitrogenous waste like urea and uric acid for conservation of water. We know that the major advantage that an aquatic organism has, it doesn't need to worry about conserving water, whereas a terrestrial animal needs to conserve water. As we have already learned, ammonia is the most toxic form. Why? Because it requires high amount of water for its removal, and the same thing cannot be adopted by terrestrial animals as it is more interested to conserve water. So what is the solution? The solution is to look for a nitrogenous waste for which the need for removal of water is very, very less. And that is why we find that terrestrial animals have chosen either urea or uric acid as the nitrogenous waste product. So what actually happens in the animals which produce urea? And those animals which produce urea as a waste product, we call them as ureotelic animals. So mammals, many terrestrial amphibians, and marine fishes mainly excrete urea and are called ureotelic animals. So what are the examples we have here? Mammals, many terrestrial amphibians and marine fishes mainly excrete urea and are called ureotelic animals. So how exactly does this ureotelic animal produce urea? So what basically happens is, even the ureotelic animal produces ammonia. But this ammonia first goes to the liver to be converted into a safer form of nitrogenous waste, and that is urea. So ureotelic animals also produce ammonia, but the same ammonia gets converted into urea in the liver. Then this urea is released in the blood, and then this urea is actually filtered by the kidney and it is excreted out. So hope you could understand the mechanism that ureotelic animals have adopted for conserving water, because as we know, in comparison to ammonia, urea needs less amount of water for its removal. So we are left with the last category, and that is uricotelic animals. So let's have a look. So let's see the examples first. Reptiles, birds, land snails and insects excrete nitrogenous waste as uric acid in the form of pellet or paste. So by this, what can we understand? We can understand that the examples of animals given above, they all produce a kind of solid urine, because urine is liquid, right? So uricotelic animals are much more stingier when it comes to excretion. They don't want to lose even a drop of water. So what they have done, they have converted their excretory nitrogenous waste in the form of pellet or paste with a minimum loss of water, and are called uricotelic animals. So uricotelic animals are those animals which produce uric acid as their nitrogenous waste. And in what form is the nitrogenous waste produced? It is produced in the form of pellet or paste. So now let's have a look at the different excretory organs of animals. So the first one, we begin with the invertebrates. So in invertebrates, we can observe the excretory organ in the form of simple tubular forms. Whereas in vertebrates, the same simple tubular forms has become complex to become or form kidneys. And if we have a look at Platyhelminthes, we find flame cell is the excretory organ. In case of earthworm, we find nephridia as the excretory organ. In cockroach, we find Malpighian tubules, and in prawns, we find green glands as the excretory organs. So these are the different excretory organs that we can find in different animals. So that concludes our discussion on the basic understanding that we need to know before we move on to the human excretory system. So we begin our discussion now on the human excretory system. So the human excretory system consists of a pair of kidneys, as you can see here, a pair of ureter, a urinary bladder and urethra. So how many parts does the human excretory system consist? It consists of a pair of kidney, a pair of ureter, a urinary bladder and urethra. So we have got four main parts. We have got four main parts in the human excretory system. So let's describe the kidney. So the kidney is reddish brown, bean-shaped structure situated between the level of last thoracic and third lumbar vertebrae, and it is close to the dorsal inner wall of the abdominal cavity. So do remember the location of kidney with regard to the vertebral column. It is present between the level of last thoracic and third lumbar vertebrae. And in which part of our body is the kidney located? It is present in our abdominal cavity. Okay, that is at the dorsal end of the abdominal cavity. we find our kidney locate.